In this episode, we pull together several major parts of cybersecurity that beginners often learn one at a time, even though real organizations live with all of them at once. Data, identity, network, cloud, and governance can sound like separate subjects owned by separate teams, but security grows weaker when those decisions are made in isolation. A company may protect data carefully on paper, yet still expose it through poor access decisions, weak network boundaries, risky cloud settings, or unclear accountability. That is why integration matters so much. Security becomes stronger when people stop asking only whether each area is managed on its own and start asking whether decisions in one area support or weaken decisions in the others. Once you understand that connection, cybersecurity begins to look less like a collection of separate controls and more like one system of trust, access, visibility, and responsibility that has to work together if it is going to protect anything meaningful. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is part of our companion study series. The first book is a detailed study guide that explains the exam and helps you prepare for it with confidence. The second is a Kindle-only ebook with 1,000 flashcards you can use on your mobile device or Kindle for quick review. You can find both at cyber.Author.Me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A common problem in real environments is that each area is handled with a narrow view of success. The data team may focus on retention and classification. The identity team may focus on account creation and sign-in. The network team may focus on connectivity and traffic rules. The cloud team may focus on deployment and service availability, and leadership may treat governance as policy language that sits above daily work. None of those efforts are wrong by themselves, but trouble starts when they do not connect. A data decision that never affects access rules is incomplete. An identity decision that ignores where data lives is incomplete. A network design that does not reflect trust levels or business sensitivity is incomplete. A cloud deployment that moves fast without clear ownership or policy alignment is incomplete. Governance is supposed to bind these decisions together, but if it exists only in documents and not in how changes are made, then each team may optimize for its own goal, while the organization as a whole becomes harder to defend. Data is often the best place to start because it is usually the reason the rest of the security program exists in the first place. Organizations care about systems, users, and services largely because those things create, process, store, or move information that matters to the business. Some data is public and low risk, while other data is highly sensitive because it involves customers, employees, finances, operations, intellectual property, or private communications. Once you understand what kind of data is involved, many other security decisions become clearer. Sensitive data usually requires tighter identity controls, stronger monitoring, more deliberate network pathways, and more careful cloud service choices. It also creates stronger governance needs around retention, sharing, and accountability. When teams skip this starting point, they often protect technology in a generic way instead of protecting the actual information that makes misuse, exposure, or loss so harmful in the first place. Identity decisions matter because they answer one of the most basic questions in security, which is who or what should be trusted to do what. A person signs in, a service account connects, an application talks to another application, or an administrator performs a high-impact change, and each of those actions depends on identity. If identity design is weak, then it does not matter how carefully the data was classified or how expensive the cloud platform is, because the wrong person or process may still be able to reach something powerful. That is why identity and access management, IAM, cannot be treated as a side function that only creates accounts and resets passwords. Good IAM should reflect the sensitivity of the data, the risk of the environment, the importance of the role, and the consequences of misuse. When identity decisions are integrated properly, access becomes more intentional. The organization stops asking only whether a user can sign in and starts asking whether that identity should be able to reach this data from this place, through this pathway, for this purpose, under these conditions. Network decisions shape how identities, systems, and data can actually interact in practice. A network is not just a technical backdrop. It is the set of routes and boundaries that influences what can communicate, how easily activity can spread, and where security controls have a chance to slow or observe harmful behavior. If the network is too flat, then compromise in one area can quickly affect many others. If sensitive systems share broad connectivity with ordinary user spaces, then access mistakes become much more dangerous. If remote connections, internal services, and cloud workloads are all linked without enough separation, the organization may not notice how much trust it has created until something goes wrong. Integrated decision-making means network design should reflect data sensitivity, identity trust levels, and business need rather than only convenience. The best network choices are not simply those that make communication possible. They are the ones that make necessary communication possible while still limiting unnecessary exposure, unnecessary movement, and unnecessary dependence on luck. Cloud decisions add another layer because cloud services can expand flexibility and speed while also multiplying the effect of mistakes. A cloud platform does not erase the need to think about data, identity, network, or governance. It intensifies that need because the scale, speed, and visibility of change can be much greater. Data may be stored in new locations, copied across regions, exposed through configuration choices, or shared through features that seem helpful until they are used carelessly. Identity may become more powerful because cloud administration can control many services at once. Network choices may become less visible to beginners because the pathways are created through software and service relationships rather than through equipment people can physically point to. Governance becomes even more important because the organization needs clear rules for what can be deployed, who can approve it, how it is monitored, and what standards apply. When cloud decisions are made separately from the rest of the security model, the environment can become fast and functional while also becoming more exposed than anyone intended. Governance is what turns these connected ideas into an actual operating model instead of a loose collection of good intentions. In plain language, governance is how the organization decides what is required, who owns what, how exceptions are handled, how risk is judged, and how change is kept under control. Beginners sometimes imagine governance as paperwork that slows down technical teams, but good governance is actually what helps technical teams avoid working against one another. It creates a common frame so that data rules influence identity design influences network trust influences cloud deployment, and all of those choices are visible to leadership and accountable owners. Without governance, one team may permit a risky shortcut because it solves a local problem, while another team never realizes the wider impact until later. Governance is therefore not separate from the technical environment. It is the structure that helps make separate technical choices behave like one coordinated security program instead of 5 disconnected efforts moving in different directions. A simple business example helps make the integration clearer. Imagine an organization building a cloud-based customer support platform where employees can view account records, upload documents, and coordinate service requests. The data inside that platform includes personal details, internal notes, and operational information that should not be visible to everyone. Identity decisions must define the difference between a customer, a support employee, a team lead, and a privileged administrator. Network decisions must separate public-facing access from internal management paths and limit how support systems talk to other sensitive business systems. Cloud decisions must control storage settings, service exposure, logging, and deployment permissions. Governance decisions must define who approves design changes, what data is allowed in the platform, how long records stay there, and who accepts the risk of exceptions. If even one of those areas is handled carelessly, the whole platform becomes weaker. If they are handled together, the same platform becomes much easier to trust, monitor, and improve. One of the strongest ways to integrate these domains is to build decisions around trust boundaries and least privilege. When data is highly sensitive, fewer identities should be able to reach it, fewer network paths should lead to it, and fewer cloud services should be allowed to interact with it without deliberate approval. The same logic applies in reverse. Less sensitive data may permit broader access and simpler pathways, which helps the organization avoid using the same level of friction everywhere. This is important because integration is not about locking everything down equally. It is about matching protection to consequence. If a service account can read customer records, then its identity protection should be stronger, its allowed connections should be narrower, and its use should be visible in monitoring. If an administrator can change cloud-wide settings, then governance should require higher trust, clearer approval, and stronger review of that role. Integration works when people stop applying security controls as isolated habits and begin applying them as responses to trust, consequence, and business purpose. Another place where integration matters is change. An organization may make a perfectly reasonable change in one area and still create new risk because nobody reviewed what that change means elsewhere. A team might move an application into a new cloud service without revisiting identity permissions, logging, network exposure, or data retention rules. Another team might broaden access for convenience without realizing that the same account now reaches more sensitive records than before. A third team might open a network path to solve a support problem without noticing that the new connection bypasses the original design assumptions about trust. These are not rare mistakes. They happen because technology changes faster than connected thinking. Integrated decision-making requires a habit of asking what else must be reviewed when one part of the system changes. If data location changes, identity and governance should be revisited. If network trust changes, data access and monitoring should be revisited. That kind of cross-checking is what keeps normal operational change from quietly undoing the logic of the original security design. Monitoring and visibility also become much stronger when these areas are treated as one connected story. A suspicious alert becomes far more useful when the team knows what data was involved, which identity performed the action, what network path was used, which cloud resource was touched, and what governance rules apply to that situation. Without integration, teams often see only fragments. One tool says a user signed in strangely, another says data moved unexpectedly, and another shows a configuration change. But nobody quickly connects the pieces because each system is managed as a separate technical island. Integrated decisions make monitoring more meaningful because the organization already understands which identities are privileged, which data is sensitive, which cloud assets are critical, and which network flows are normal. That shared context is what helps defenders distinguish background noise from meaningful risk. It also helps leadership understand why an event matters, because the explanation can connect business-sensitive data, trusted identities, exposed pathways, and policy obligations into one coherent picture. The same integration becomes critical during incident response, IR. When a real event begins, the organization has to answer several questions quickly. What data may be affected, which identities were involved, what network routes should be limited, which cloud resources are part of the problem, and what governance obligations apply for approvals, reporting, notifications, or evidence handling. If those areas have been managed separately, response becomes slower and more chaotic because every team is trying to reconstruct the bigger picture under pressure. If those areas were already integrated, responders can move more deliberately. They know which systems are sensitive, which accounts matter most, which cloud services require immediate review, which pathways can be isolated, and who has the authority to make key decisions. This is one reason mature security programs do not wait until the incident to discover how their environment is connected. They do that thinking earlier so that response is based on known relationships rather than on emergency guesswork. A few misconceptions are worth clearing up here. One is the belief that integration means every team must merge into one giant group that handles everything. That is not necessary, and in many organizations it would not even be practical. What matters is not that every function becomes identical. What matters is that their decisions are aligned, visible to one another, and governed by a shared understanding of risk and responsibility. Another misconception is that governance automatically slows the cloud or blocks useful change. In reality, weak governance usually creates more delay later because teams have to clean up unclear access, bad configurations, and conflicting ownership after the fact. A third misconception is that only very large organizations need this kind of connected thinking. Smaller organizations may have fewer systems, but they still have data, identities, networks, cloud services, and decisions about responsibility. The need for integration does not begin at a certain size. It begins the moment an organization depends on digital trust to operate safely. Another beginner mistake is thinking that one strong tool can solve what is really an integration problem. A company may buy a cloud security product, an identity platform, a data protection service, or a network monitoring tool and assume that the purchase itself creates alignment. Tools can help, but they cannot decide what the organization values, who should have access, which network paths make sense, or who must approve risky changes. Those are governance and design questions, not product features. The same mistake appears when teams use different success measures that never meet in the middle. One group celebrates rapid deployment, another celebrates low help desk delay, another celebrates broad connectivity, and another celebrates policy completion. Yet none of them ask whether the overall result is a safer or more coherent environment. Integration requires shared goals, shared context, and shared accountability. Without those, even very capable teams can unintentionally build a system where every local decision seems reasonable while the combined effect becomes difficult to trust. As we close, the main lesson is that data, identity, network, cloud, and governance decisions only become truly effective when they are made together as part of one security story. Data tells you what matters, identity tells you who can act, network tells you where activity can move, cloud tells you where and how services operate, and governance tells you how all of those decisions are owned, reviewed, and kept aligned over time. If one part is treated in isolation, the others will eventually feel the weakness. If they are integrated thoughtfully, the organization becomes easier to protect because its trust relationships, access rules, pathways, services, and responsibilities reinforce one another instead of pulling apart. For a brand new learner, that is the real value of this topic. It turns cybersecurity from a set of separate departments and tools into a connected way of thinking about how digital systems should behave. Once you see those connections clearly, stronger security decisions become much easier to make and much harder to undo by accident.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.